Hello, everybody. Welcome to Community Conversations. Yay. Oh, you're so kind. You're so kind. Before I welcome today's speakers, I do have a couple of announcements. We have flyers in the back for both the entirety of our Community Conversations series, which gives you all the titles and dates, but also gives you like the website link. So if you want to go there and look at the Zooms or anything like that, that's always an option. And Social Sciences is going to be hosting our special event on the evening of May 8th. So Thursday, May 8th at 7 p.m., we're having the William Vest Memorial Lecture, and we're welcoming Dr. Nicholas Krapser, who is a mental health counselor and clinical director at 4D Recovery. He's going to be talking about mass incarceration in America, understanding the past, evaluating the present, and innovating for the future. So if you're interested in that, we've got flyers back there. That is like a big social science event we have every 2 years. So that's going to be coming up. But also, of course, join us each week for the duration of the quarter here. So now I get to welcome today's speakers. All right. So today we have Ian King, faculty librarian, and he has a master's of library and information science from Wayne State University and a master's of science in adult education from Portland State University. In addition to his regular librarian duties, Ian is a guru of open educational resources. He is my guru for open educational resources and liaison for the BAS programs and teaches a class on critical thinking, which is very valuable in this day and age. Julia Mitchell received an AA here at LCC, woo, before completing a Bachelor of Arts in Strategic Communication at Northwest University. At LCC, she is the tutoring program manager, which means she gets to hire, train, and supervise some of the coolest student workers on campus. And we might even have one or two of them here right now. Anyway, please welcome Ian and Julia.
Can everyone hear me just fine? Cool. Okay, we'll project. Thank you for your honesty, Sarah. As Courtney said, my name is Julia. I work in the library, and we're so excited to get to chat with you today in this wonderful series about inclusion. Ian and I will be talking about a culture of community developing a space where diversity can thrive. What would you like to say here?
Thanks, Jules. Can everybody hear me? Thank you. So as Courtney mentioned, I'm Ian. I'm one of the librarians on campus. So the first thing we want to talk about is progress to the...
We're hoping the clicker works, by the way.
So we're going to be talking about defining diversity because it's such a buzzy, wordy thing. We're going to talk about what diversity is.
And then we're going to talk about the impacts of diverse spaces. So there's a lot of conversation culturally right now about what is the point of diversity? Why do we need it? Is it even a thing? So we're actually going to be breaking that down. We love our statistics. Thank you, librarian. So we'll be looking at that more holistically before finally
talking about how we, both of us and also the place we work, strives to include everybody to foster connections on a personal level and really just what diversity looks like in the real world.
Yes. So we're going to provide a definition about diversity to kind of narrow the scope for this conversation. But before we do, as Ian mentioned, it's kind of this lofty big word discussed so often today. So there are note cards and pens scattered about. Hopefully you have a pen and writing utensil. Before we kind of provide the definition we'll be using, we want everyone to think critically about your current definition of diversity or how you perceive it when you consider that term. So we're going to give you about a minute to jot down some thoughts on what is the definition of this word? What does it mean to you when you consider the term diversity? And we're hoping to call on some volunteers to share their definitions here after about a minute. So I'll stop yapping so you can start writing.
Yeah, that lack of time is going to be
About another 15 seconds, try to wrap up your thoughts. Okay, feel free to continue writing if you are, but we're going to start taking some volunteers. So would any lovely audience member be willing to contribute their definition to the conversation? Varied. Wonderful, thank you.
Great definition.
So mine says the intentional inclusion of a variety of individuals from all walks of life, including background, race, socioeconomic class.
I like the use of the word intentional there as well. How about one more? Celebrating differences. And Linda, what do you have? Different in any way, shape, or form. Sorry. Well, since the other Linda's here, would you like to contribute as well? No. Okay. Thank you so much for all of these. So we had varied, we have intentional, different in all shapes and forms, celebrating differences. These are all wonderful, and we're realizing from how varied these are that it's such a big and all-encapsulating term. So to kind of narrow, or I guess broaden the scope for today's conversation, this is the definition that Ian has for us.
So coming from the Cambridge Dictionary, it is defined as the fact of many different types of things or people being included in something. So very general, very vague, very academic-y sounding. But I mean, that's Cambridge for you. So the way I look at it is diversity is just recognizing that we're all different. We all live different lives. We've all had different personal histories. We all come from different backgrounds. Therefore, each one of us is a diverse individual. Julia and I, however good friends that we may be, are very different in a lot of different ways. So we have a diverse perspective on life. And so while this is our official definition for today, just recognize that really what it comes down to is, as you've all mentioned, it's intentional, it's celebratory, it's varied and vague, it's diverse.
Yes. Okay, so when we're talking about why diversity, if you remember nothing else from this conversation, because it's the world we actually live in, there's lots of cultural conversation right now about maybe the United States is homogenous and diversity shouldn't take the center stage in the way that it has in recent conversation or something like that. But we want to talk about why diversity because these are the reality of the makeup of the United States. And we chose some that are more particularly relevant to maybe the Lower Columbia region as well as our institution here. So racial and ethnic diversity. Currently, minorities make up to 42% of the US population. So they're there's only barely kind of a dominant percentage of individuals in the nation. When we look at disability diversity, individuals with disabilities are between 13 to 28% of the population. And single parent diversity, which is particularly relevant in our service area. Single parent family groups with at least one child under 18 make up 28.3% of the population. So when we're talking about diversity, we need to set the baseline that this is the reality of the world that we live in. As Ian pointed out, really every single person is different. So sometimes diversity is often boiled down simply to like race or ethnicity or people racially different than you. That's what comprises diversity. But here are just 3 different examples. But really, for the context of this conversation, we want everyone to be thinking about diversity as simply as the person to your right and the person to your left are bringing diversity into your social circle, into your life, because we are all unique and different, which leads us to this.
So yeah, the impact. Like, what are the benefits of diversity? Why have it? We've seen like why diversity, but what do we get from it? So the first one is it mirrors the real world. As Julia mentioned, like we see diversity every single day. The two of us work in the Learning Commons. Every single encounter we have with students, faculty, staff, community members brings a whole new perspective for us. So it helps us to minimize microcosms or minimize like that homogenous feeling of everybody is just like me, which also means that we get to remove echo chambers. We get to remove this idea that everybody thinks the same way I do. I know that that's not true. But with the world of social media, sometimes our algorithms group us into those echo chambers. So being in the real world, seeing how the spaces are diverse, we realize that not everybody thinks like I do.
Yeah, which leads us to our next one, which is improving learning. So we're actually increasing our awareness and broadening our perspectives when we embrace the social cultural diversity that can be all around us. Especially here in the context of LCC, a lot of folks are in college classrooms with people that are quite different than them in a multitude of ways, right? And so our learning is better served when we're listening to perspectives that are different than us. It teaches us a perspective that we can't have when we're only looking from our own lived experience. It gives us the opportunity to hear from folks that maybe grew up in a different family setting, a different geographical area. They have different languages, religions, politics. And so it allows us to have just a broader perspective on the world, which is naturally good for our learning.
Which means that it increases our empathy. As we encounter people that are different from us, that have that different history, that maybe weren't as, didn't grow up in as advantageous setting as we did, or maybe grew up more advantageous than we did, it helps us to mitigate bias. It helps us to realize that maybe we don't always have the best idea, or maybe we're not always the smartest person in the room, or the most capable, or the most handsome. It helps us to see life through their eyes as opposed to just our own.
Okay, and maybe to nod to our last one here of strength and critical thinking, let's do a little bit of call and response. What are some thoughts on maybe how embracing diverse spaces can help improve our critical thinking? There's a little bit of a cheat code there if you don't have ideas.
Different people from different backgrounds come up with different ideas.
Okay, different problem solving ideas. What else? Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that.
We go into the situation thinking a certain way, and we're ironbound to, think that way, then whatever the situation is, we're not gonna pick up on it. And it fully, if we go in with an open mind of, kind of understanding that, hey, we aren't the smartest in the world, maybe, or maybe we are, but let's find out.
That's awesome. Thank you both so much. As both of our audience members correctly identified, we're able to make more informed decisions, partly because we're listening to other voices and we're going to come up with different solutions based off our lived experiences, as well as we're going to help maybe limit, kind of like Ian was saying with mitigating biases, we're going to help kind of look around the stereotypes that have maybe been ingrained in us. We're going to have a more open perspective, which increases our ability to make more informed decisions.
So what does this look like in life? You know, it's easy to talk about these abstract things, critical thinking, empathy, but what does that really look like in the real world? So an example of that is in healthcare. In healthcare, you run into a lot of different people. And so there have been numerous studies that show that as a workspace is more diverse, productivity goes up because people are able to share ideas across, potential divides. It also shows that there's better healthcare delivery. So people get better healthcare when they're in a setting where the workforce is diverse, because those doctors, nurses, the specialists are constantly being faced with different body types, different body shapes, different mental health problems, different everything. And so they're able to better serve those people.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about fostering connections. I know it kind of seems like, wow, we moved through all of that pretty fast. This is called community conversations, so we want to have a lot of this time be conversation with the group. So Ian and I, when we're talking about diverse as this broad, all-encapsulating thing, diversity, really, it's so much more simple than that. Creating a culture of community does not have to be this lofty strategic plan with a SWOT analysis. It can be easy, intentional daily choices. And we're going to share a little bit about how we strive to do that in our personal and professional lives. But once again, before we get to our definitions and suggestions, we would like to have some reflective practice with you all.
So first, think about within your social circle, do you have folks, friends, colleagues that look or think differently than you? Whether yes or no, take a moment to to consider some potential reasons for why. So just take a minute to write down your response to this. Think about, do I have friends that are different than me? Do I have family members that are different than me? Do I have roommates? So within your social circle can mean people you encounter like in your daily life on a regular basis. And then think about why are they different? Or maybe how are they different? And we'll take about a minute for that as well.
Maybe two.
Maybe two.
Take about another 15 seconds, try to wrap up those thoughts.
All right. Does anybody want to share their Linda?
Doesn't make it, they just it's better for me, so I.
Yeah. Make your own life easier, right? Or maybe improve it a little bit.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
No. But they're different for everybody. I think if there are things that I find interesting and I'd like to do that else does, and very few other people. It's just that this is what I'm working.
Mhm. Yeah. One more.
History. How you generate. Me, and they gave a perspective of living through the events than I would, or certainly 18-year-old students might. And that's always a really refreshing and exciting aspect of our discussions.
Mhm. Great. Next
Awesome.
question.
Thank you for those contributions. And I hope for those that wrote things down, you're thinking, kind of evaluating the daily life that we don't really consider in a more forefront way. Which leads us to our next question, and we'll have a bit of conversation here. How do you engage with others interpersonally that you think promotes or welcomes the perspectives of people that are different than you? Do you struggle with this? So our friend Linda shared that maybe curiosity, so I'm assuming asking a lot of questions probably comes into play there. Well, guilty as charged. Wonderful. Well, thank you for being a great example. Yeah.
So a lot of people in my social circle are younger than I am, different generation, like my roommates, for example. I struggle with this a lot because they have different like outlooks on the world, really, or what their priorities are. And it really takes everything I have not to just be like, well, why the heck did you make that choice? So I think that for me personally, that's kind of like just accepting that they want to handle their life the way that they choose to handle it. It's kind of how I go about promoting their different perspective.
So a little bit of struggle with the youngins, maybe questionable young adult decisions, but trying to hands-off approach.
Welcome to parenthood.
Okay, what else?
Being friends with people, I've found it's one of the easiest ways to get people to kind of open up is asking them open-ended questions about what they do or what they enjoy. So I guess I don't really struggle with it because I do enjoy hearing other people's opinions, and we've all had different upbringings. So whenever I ask that question to somebody, it's always good perspectives.
Any other thoughts on this? If we struggle, why?
Our expectations have led us to be.
Okay. Receiving new information. It's maybe counter to our previously held beliefs.
Yeah, in the back.
Contentious.
Nobody likes being uncomfortable, do they?
How about one more?
Yeah.
Sometimes struggle with comments from people much younger than I about things that in my mind seem to be pretty going forward. And when I see those curves, it makes me stop back and think, am I thinking this? Whatever, but it also gives me that could
Yeah.
I really,
Generational divide is sometimes a difficult one.
yes. And I really appreciate that you stopped to take the time to ask, like, am I actually correct in being resolute about this? Because I think that's the hurdle that can be so difficult for all of us, regardless of age, to maybe take a moment to step outside of those held beliefs and think like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have an iron clasp grip on this. So thank you so much for your contributions on these questions.
So we both work in the Learning Commons. We have lived there for 6 years now.
Some of us.
You were there for a while too.
So we want to talk, we would be remiss not to share the context in which we both work professionally here at LCC and the ways that we think it has shaped us professionally and personally. So as Ian mentioned, we're the Learning Commons, that has 3 departments. We have the library, we have the tutoring center, and then we have e-learning. Some e-learning folks might be speckled in the crowd. And some things about the Learning Commons that we think helps a wide range of students feel included are.
For one, we strive to have a variety of studying workspaces. People learn in different manners. They study in different manners. They get together with their friends in different ways. So we want to make sure that everybody can find a space that they can use for themselves. In a minute, you'll see some pictures of our spaces, and you'll be able to see like that variety of studying areas and maybe how one might be a little more comfortable to you than another.
Yes, we also have we strive to have a lack of hierarchy among staff and student workers. So we have different employee types in the library. We have faculty, we have exempt staff, we have classified, we have part-time workers, and we have student employees, and we all work really interconnectedly behind the desk. This sounds like just a Learning Commons plug, which it is a little bit. Come see us in the library. We'd love to have you. But specifically what feels so important about this to Ian and I is that everyone has an important role to play and every voice should be heard, because as we discussed previously, when you hear those different perspectives, you're better able to make informed decisions. It increases your empathy. So for all of these reasons, specifically having a lack of hierarchy and bringing forward student workers to the table to allow to share their perspective and having different kind of employee types, we think makes us a strong department for supporting the wide range of students that we have here on campus.
Exactly. And we love our student workers. They are amazing. Which means we also strive to create a safe and welcoming environment. And we do that partially through intentional training and practice, and also through making sure that everyone feels comfortable. Students know that they can come up to one of us with issues. We're all front facing. Very rarely do we hide out in our offices and ignore people. The vast majority of our team is right there, front and center, welcoming everybody. So we want them to feel welcome coming to us. We want them to feel safe, knowing that their lifestyle is okay in our library. We want to embrace that diversity that is on our campus and in our community.
Yes.
So here is some of our spaces. If you want, just a computer to use, or if you want like some of these pods where you just want to take a nap or just study, if you want to be in a classroom, if you want to be out on the balcony, if you're okay with just being amongst everybody else using computers, we want to make sure that everyone feels safe, everyone feels welcome, and everyone can find a place.
I hope everyone appreciates the size of this cursor too.
Yes.
I was really enjoying that.
And we also, we also want to make sure that our international students feel welcome. So we have flags from all of our international students' homes, so that when they come into the library, because a lot of times they come through the library to go to the international office, they can be reminded of their home and feel like they belong.
So here are some ways that we foster connection, things that we try to embody professionally and personally to help kind of lower that sense of discomfort with folks that are different than us and increase the level of curiosity that we have. And part one of this will be
Me. And pay attention to the things that we both say, and see that diversity. So for me, I want to de-silo the campus. My role as a faculty librarian means that I am not in one faculty department. Well, I am, but I work with faculty across campus. So I work with Courtney on OER stuff, and I work with Natalie Ton on biology things, and I work with Armando on chemistry. I work across campus. I want to bridge the divides because a lot of times we get siloed into our areas, and we forget that maybe other departments exist, or we get so focused on our areas we don't think that I should reach out. So one of the things I want to do is make sure that I de-silo the campus, that I reach out to people across campus and collaborate with them, come up with ideas on how I can work with them in their classrooms, or how I can work with their students, how I can make sure that they're doing the right type of research, finding the right types of resources. So that is one way I do it. Another is I'm a people person. I like to talk to people. I like to hear about them. I like to find common ground, because I know that as I find common ground, I can start to help them feel comfortable, and I can feel comfortable myself. Think about those times when you're talking with somebody and there's just nothing that you share that is even remotely similar. Like, how difficult is that conversation? How uncomfortable is that conversation? But as you find common ground with somebody and you start to see that you have shared interests, you become more comfortable with their differences. They become more comfortable with your differences. And you start to see that maybe we're not as different as we thought. We have things we share. Next, that means that I like to embrace everyone's life experiences. I have lived a particular life. Julia has lived a particular life. You all have lived particular lives. And that means we have different personal histories. We have different life experiences. So I want to see how your life has shaped you, and maybe compare it to my own and see, like, that's why I'm, believe differently, or that's why I have these different ideas than you do. Because as you embrace everyone's life experiences, you're also embracing them as an individual, and you're seeing that you can learn from them. As many of you have mentioned, when you're talking to people that, that are different from you, you're looking for maybe different ideas than what you already brought to the table. You're looking for different things you haven't tried, or maybe a different perspective, a different way of viewing the world around you. So for me, that looks like I'm embracing their life experiences and I'm trying to find that common ground. And lastly, I strive to acknowledge my own privilege. Now, a lot of times when we talk about privilege, we're talking about white privilege. And yes, I am a white, middle-aged American. But there's all types of other privileges. As a faculty member, I have a certain level of privilege on campus. I have to acknowledge that when I'm working with students or when I'm working with staff members or other faculty. I have to acknowledge I have a privilege in maybe where I grew up or how I grew up. In a two-parent home where both my parents loved me, that is a privilege that some of our students and staff didn't have. I have to acknowledge that when I work with them. And I have to recognize that that means that I have a different perspective. And yes, I do acknowledge my race, gender, and sexual identity privileges because those are actual things. They've become kind of a political landmine to talk about privilege and all of that, but it's something we need to recognize because I have a different shared experience than maybe my biracial nephew, or maybe my biracial daughter. She's going to have totally different privileges than I do. So we need to be willing to acknowledge those. And so these are all things that I just do on a regular basis. I'm not setting out to think about them. It's just what I've internalized and how I've embraced the diversity around me.
Yes. And something we did want to clarify is Ian and I in no way want to present as if we're the experts and we totally understand this diversity thing and we totally know how to nail every conversation ever with every kind of person. That's not what this is about. Really what we're trying to share with you is when we were kind of reflecting on, well, what happens in the Learning Commons? What do we do as individuals that we think helps others feel comfortable with us or that we think helps build community? These were the ideas that came up. So maybe de-siloing campus isn't something that would apply to you in your context, but what about kind of crossing those divides that may exist in your life? What about these ideas? We're hoping maybe some of them land with you as strategies that you hadn't thought of before. And if you're open to trying, maybe, practicing them in this next week in the different social environments that you're in. So that was a note. My turn. So something that got spoiled a little bit, thank you, Linda, was asking questions is so huge. Ian is the world's biggest people person. I am actually not. I would definitely classify myself as introverted, a little bit more reserved in social settings. But regardless of your people skills or your people power, something that I think we can all agree helps people feel seen or known is talking about themselves, is learning more about them. So for me, one of the greatest ways that I connect with others is just by asking questions. And I wish I had a laser pointer, but the big word in there is genuine as well as sincere. People can totally feel when what you're saying or when the questions you're asking are flat and when you're not actually listening. Nobody wants to do the favorite color, favorite restaurant, what's your star sign for the next hour, right? It's not really helping people to feel welcome or helping them to feel connected and known by you if you're not genuinely interested in knowing what they have to say. So taking a sincere interest in other people, bouncing off of the answers that they've already provided you, you're helping to develop that connection in a really, I think, comfortable interpersonal way. Additionally, intentionality in conversation. So I have a pretty big student worker team. I have 24 tutors on my team, and they are so different. I have people that range in age from 16 literally into their 60s. I have people with varying levels of previous education, folks returning to school. I have parents, I have teenagers, excuse me. And so keeping in mind that when we're talking about diversity, it's often viewed as this conglomerate. You have a group of 50 people and they're all different from one another. Sure, but it's so individualistic too. So every person you're talking with, as we've said so many times, they have a different, unique experience than you. And trying to keep in mind, kind of along the lines of acknowledging privilege, how might our lives or our positionalities intersect or not jive with one another, and trying to be intentional with our language choice and offhanded comments. So I'm going to out myself with my upbringing and the social groups that I grew up with. Some word choices or turns of phrase that I have since learned in my journey of education that are not appropriate. Something like gypped, which is disrespectful to Romanian traveling culture and things like that, as well as lynched, maybe not the best word to use. really common one that I grew up with was low man on the totem pole, which can be disrespectful to different Indigenous communities that use that to represent themselves. So things like that, of thinking about what are things that are just ingrained in my language or seem like totally unimportant phrases. Lame is very considered rude to the disabled community and the associations that have been placed on them historically. So keeping in mind, like, simple phrases, singular word choices that can disenfranchise and other those that are in your community. So maintaining that kind of thoughtfulness and remembering that even small choices have impact can help call others in and not literally hurt anyone's feelings, as simple as that may sound, just trying to be respectful to those different identities. Additionally, follow through. This is all really individualistic. My approach to knowing people and fostering connection and hoping that those that engage with me feel welcome in my space, whether that's my personal life, the learning commons, my office. So these all kind of go hand in hand. They all kind of play out at the same time, but follow through. Oh my gosh, remembering what folks tell you. It is so important when we're listening that we are also remembering. So don't just ask questions. Try to actually remember those. So obviously, for those of us that engage with a lot of people pretty frequently, you're not going to remember the database of information that you've required about every single human ever, but try to be intentional about at least remembering the highlight reel. What's a specific thing about this individual? Maybe what's the common ground that you found that you can connect on? So the next time that you engage with that person, call back to that. Hey, last time we chatted, I knew you were going into a chemistry test. How did that go? Things of that nature can just help people feel so seen and actually like they're heard, which we have so much noise and so much talking culturally and so little listening and so little remembrance. Additionally, follow through on what you'll say you do. So for those of us that work with students, something that I have found to really make a huge difference with them is if you say you're going to write that letter of recommendation, do you follow through? If you say that you have time for them for this conversation, for advising, for whatever it may be, do you follow through? If they had a family situation that they had to run out for, do you check up with them? Things like that make such a difference in helping, because these are all human specific things, pretty much, regardless of background, regardless of previous life experiences. These are things that help generally most people feel appreciated and feel welcome in your social circle. And last, to bounce off of what Ian and share with what he said, because I think that this is so important for everyone to keep in mind when they're engaging with others. We need to recognize where our identities position us in our broader social context. And it's something that isn't always at the forefront of every conversation, but keeping this in the back of your mind and just keeping in mind how might literally the way I look or the way I talk or my religious beliefs or my sexual orientation, things like that, that other people might perceive about me and feel some type of way. How is that playing out with those that I engage in? So trying to keep things that are always kind of in the background, pulling them to the forefront when it seems relevant. Acknowledging your privilege is always a good idea. It's a real thing. Okay, we crushed that timing, if I might say so. And now we are open for questions.
All right, so I'll come around with the microphone to pick it up on the recording if anybody has any questions. And I will start with one, just as an example, talking about how you appear to people or something like that. One of the things that I've had to deal with is being a Northerner. I talk fast, and doing my graduate work at the University of Houston in Texas, my students did not appreciate that. And so that was sort of a moment of like, oh, I need to recognize that I have a different way of speaking than people in Texas might. And therefore I had to slow down a little bit because it was not a cadence that they were used to. And that was just a very minor thing, but it really helped to improve the way we related to one another.
Thank you for sharing.
Do you have a trick to remembering people's names? I have the heart. And it's just so embarrassing for me. I've just come to the conclusion where I just ask because other people actually do ask too, because they have the same problem. So if you have something.
I'm going to jump in on this.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I don't have a tried and true mnemonic device for remembering people's names. I find myself, I think, blessed to have a little bit of natural skill there. However, what I was going to offer is I think what you just said, it is so much better to ask than it is to pretend. Going back to the words of genuine and sincere, when I have a student I've engaged with a couple of times, but I've never actually caught their name, or maybe I should have caught their name at this point, I will just hit it head on. I'll be like, hey, can you remind me of your name? Like, we have so many conversations and I somehow miss that critical detail, and just nailing it head on, infusing a little bit of humor. You're clearly reflecting to that person, I know you well enough to be honest about the fact I should know this, for one. And for two, you're implying that you want to know them better and you want to be able to refer to them very specifically. And maybe there's a little bit of a future forecast of having a deeper relationship. So unfortunately, I don't have a trick for you, librarian.
I don't really have a trick either, other than the fact that, as everybody knows me, I tend to acknowledge my own faults. And I am usually pretty okay feeling embarrassed and saying, you know what, like, I totally forgot your name. I know I should know who you are. I apologize. Could you remind me? Yeah, like I see students on a very regular basis, and sometimes it might take 2 or 3 or 4 months for me to remember who they are. But when I do remember, I try to acknowledge them every time I see them, to get that name ingrained in my mind, and also to let them know that I recognize them.
And repetition, repetition, repetition.
Key to learning.
So I have a question. You guys talked a lot about the things that you do in your personal and professional lives to try and show that you're accepting of diversity. Do you have any metrics for like how successful you feel you are in that front? Do you get feedback from like students or people you talk with that tell you you're on the right track? Or
You go first.
Thanks. No. The way I approach it is, did I feel comfortable about that exchange? Did I feel like the biggest thing is I want to make sure that they felt comfortable and welcomed in my space. Especially going back to acknowledging privileges. As a faculty member, I have a certain status on campus, but I also want to make sure that they feel comfortable coming to me. And if I see a student that kind of like very leeryly like looking at me, I want to make sure that they feel comfortable. That's my metric, is like, did I walk away from that thinking that they, were okay to approach me?
I'm going to jump off of that a little bit. I also would consider myself a data girly. After every single social encounter, I want to send a Google form with like survey questions about, did I crush this social interaction? I'm sure the amount of ones I get would hurt my feelings, so I don't do that. But if we can't have quantitative data, I'm going to look at qualitative a little bit. So to bounce off of what Ian said, something I think about in regards to the folks on my team, it's a little bit of that internal, like, ooh, how do I think that went? I choose to gauge my like metric of success of, is that person coming back to me? This is pretty specific in regards to like my tutoring team. I have folks that are in my office every day. I have folks that are like, hi, bye. I don't even really know when their shifts are, right? So, and we don't have to be besties with everybody. But for me, if somebody comes and we kind of have what I would consider like a deeper conversation, or we touch on topics that might be uncomfortable, I'm going to evaluate, did that person feel welcome beyond my own assessment, based off whether or not they return to chat with me further. So I don't know if that fully answered your question, but that is actually an intentional, like, I am kind of tracking the user data, so to speak, of my office space and my conversation time.
So years ago, I was studying interactions like you're talking about. And what they recommended in the study was how to ask people for what you want. And what they suggested, especially in the name, I use this with the names. Okay. Can you help me remember your name? Can you help me by whatever? But the key word here is help, because according to the article, everybody wants to be of help.
Thank you for sharing that.
That is 100% accurate. Turning to others for help kind of puts you at their level. Either it's going to raise you up to their level, or it's going to lower you down to their level. But it puts them on a level footing. So you're not like, acting like you're more than you are. You're meeting them at their place.
Hey, are there any other questions? Well, then I would like to thank Julia and Ian for joining us today, and thank you to all of you for participating.
Thank you.